Hello and welcome. Welcome to today's episode of Inspired Entrepreneur, where we just diving a little bit deeper into the world of short-term lets and service accommodation and the new regulation that could change the landscape for homeowners, investors, and local communities. So I'm your host, Greg Piskasup, and today we're just unpacking the latest proposed regulations and what they mean for property owner and how they impact your local communities across the UK. Let's get into it. So you might be aware of this very popular strategy in property investing known as a short-term let, Airbnb, and used to be known as maybe a lodger. Lodger is more long term, but you got a spare bedroom. The concept is you have a spare bedroom in your property and you could rent this on sites like Airbnb. And under the new proposed regulations, if you do this under the 90 days in a year, you can just do this legally without changing the planning permission of your new of your property. But let's start by setting the stage. So the UK government has announced new measures that will introduce the planning permission requirements and national, and a national register for short-term lets. It may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing. But this is a huge shift from current landscape where many properties operate without much, oversight and regulations in place. But that's exactly why these changes, and why now? That's a good question, because I believe the operating market for short-term accommodations has been for many years. I don't know exactly for how many, but it's been proposed, but from summer this year, property owners looking to convert their homes into a short-term lets will need a planning permission. And if they exceeded this 90-day per year, this is a part of a broader effort to control the rapid expansion of those short-term lets. In popular areas, for example, like, I live in Bristol, so Bath is the nearest one, or like York or Cornwall, where residents have, they've expressed growing concern over housing shortages and rising rents. So it is a problem for our local communities and for first-time buyers, for families wanting to buy their first property, get on that property ladder, and if the short-term lets will expand without much control and unregulated, this could put the end to the local communities, and that's why it may be important to control this. And it's not just about the planning permission. The government is also launching a national register. So I'm smiling because a lot of people might not quite like this for short-term lets, to help councils monitor and regulate these property more effectively. But is it? Or is it just they want to find out how many properties they are, tax it in a more efficient way for them? So just stay tuned and listen to this. This should give the local authorities, the data they need to address the issues with overcrowding and noise disturbance. But it also raises the questions about the personal freedoms and property rights. So if you are operating as a service accommodation operator and you have a properties and you've got any questions, please leave the comments below. I will be interesting to see what you have faced recently in your area and what questions you might have. So feel free to post them under, and when I get round to it, I will happily answer them. So let's move to it. Good morning, Clement. And good morning, everyone. So what do you think the introduction of a mandatory register, will it help improve community relations, or it will just, add unnecessary bureaucracy? Well, there are pros and cons, and let me give you just some of them. So if we just go back to beginning, so planning permissions. as it's been proposed, but it's not fully in force from summer of this year, anyone looking to convert the property into a short-term let will need to obtain a new planning permission. And they've classified this new user class as a C5. There's a there's a number of different class uses. Like C3 is a domestic dwelling house. That's normal people live in a property. C4 is a HMO class use. So this is for houses of multiple occupation up to 6-person occupancy. As if there is a more people in a HMO, for example, 7 and onwards, this will trigger a different class use, which is now sui generis. But today we are focusing on C5. And C5 is a short-term let accommodation. And it's a significant shift, from the current approach, where many short-term let operators without any formal permissions contributing, to these issues like, we know that short-term lets are really known for it's just parties, really. So people would not only parties, but tourism, renting them. If you so let's take those two examples. A group of young people would like to throw a party, a stag night, a stag do, or hen night, and they typically looking at those iconic places or great places with which are buzzing with the great nightlife, and they would they would rent the Airbnb. So one of those short-term lets for a weekend, and they throw a party. But as much as it is great for them to do that, obviously the neighbors might not quite like it, and all that noise. And if that's how the property is being used for majority of time, you can imagine none of us would enjoy a party being thrown in every weekend, just next door. Surely not. But also on the other hand is if you are, if you have a family, or if you just prefer to travel, visit new places, iconic places like Bath, York, Cornwall, your options to stay are a local hotel. Options to stay is bed and breakfast, maybe a camping site, and so on. But if you are not preferring, hotel, then you need to get yourself dressed up and go down to a restaurant to have some meal and so on. And you more of a prefer this, more casual approach to your holidays. You would choose, Airbnb over a hotel because you've got access to your kitchen, so you can prepare your meal. You can make yourself, hot drink and heat up some food, or order a takeaway. Well, you could order a takeaway to a hotel, but you know what I mean. There you've got so much more facilities, like just sofa to, to relax on and have your meal, as opposed to a hotel. Well, you don't have that, unless you fork out an extra couple of hundred for for like a suite at the hotel. But I don't know, why would you do that if you can just get a short-term let? So those popular areas, tourists. Like Edinburgh and Lake District, there's so much of short-term rentals that led to increase the property prices and rental costs. So pushing out locals, residents, and councils in these areas will now have the power to restrict the new short-term lets. So what they could do is they could introduce those Article 4 area. And Article 4, it's removing your permitted development rights. So what government has proposed is, government has proposed that they're not just going to take away your rights to convert the property to short-term let. They're going to use something known as General Permitted Development Order, and GDPO. And that gives you a right to convert the property into a different class use from C3 to, in this case, C5. And if you choose to change this property to C5, if you're outside of Article 4, you can just go ahead and do it. But if you are within Article 4 area, which is growing rapidly, and that's what government is giving councils the power to introduce the Article 4 area within their councils, and they are removing your rights to general permitted development order. So they're taking away your PD rights, so stripping you away from this permitted development, and now you will have to formally apply. So where there is already an existing Article 4 area, and this new legislation will come into force, fully into force, then you will need to fully apply to convert your property into a service accommodation. It is very unclear what they're going to do to the existing properties, whether they will require you to register I'm sure they will require you to join the national register of short-term lets, but you might be able to claim your grandfather rights for your service accommodation if you can prove that you've been running it consistently and you've got your systems in place, and I'm sure they will introduce all the rules and regulations about the health and safety, fire risk, and just they will make you demonstrate that your property does qualify and operates at those all health and safety risk assessed and minimized, and then you will be requested to register for a national register. And what that is the government will establish a mandatory national register of short-term lets. And this is to help authorities to track the number of those accommodations and enforce regulations more effectively. And what I mean, so this is an example of, local councils wants to monitor the compliance of the health and safety, as I said, and standards, and just address any negative impact of local communities. So think about the HMO guidance. If you're not aware, they are a minimum room standards, a minimum space for the tenants within the property and communal area. So it's more of it like helping tenants have access to better quality properties. And in my opinion, this isn't bad. I think actually this is really good, because this will promote only high quality properties to be available on the market. But also what it will do is it will motivate those bad landlords who are just converted the property into a short-term let, and this property doesn't meet the health and safety standards, doesn't meet the fire risk assessments, and that's I think that's a good thing, because although I'm a tenant, I'm a landlord, and I used to be a tenant, and also I'm an electrical engineer, and I go and visit places, and I go and audit, for electrical safety, existing places, and I am surprised. Why would a client or a tenant put up with such a bad, neglected properties, and they keep living in them? And why would you? Why do you accept such a low standards from your landlord? I know properties are expensive, and perhaps that's exactly what drives, in my opinion, property rental, the rental prices up, because there's so many bad landlords out there that and they just raise the prices. So if they raise the prices to your local average market, and then, for example, I'm going to buy a property, spend 150 grand to convert this into an amazing place to live, the place I would want to live in, and then I would like to put it on the market, and I'm thinking like, well, these guys, they rent this property for the local average, and I just create this amazing standards. And I want to I want to give opportunity to people who wants to look after this equally. So I will put my prices accordingly to what the market is asking for high standard properties. And there, on the other hand, we have tenants complaining that the property rents are going consistently up. But actually, this is because of the bad landlords, the landlords that do not look after their properties, because they just hiding all these issues by painting over the molded walls, and all of that is coming out again. But anyway, end of the rant. Sorry. The impact on the homeowners and local communities. So the changes that are designed, those changes are designed to strike a balance between supporting the visitor, the visitor economy, and protecting local residents, so who are struggling to find affordable housing. Let me give you an example. So under under the new rule, a homeowner can still rent out the main or sole residence up to 90 nights per year without planning permission. So if you got a bigger property, so I'll give you an example. This week I went to visit my client, and I live in Bristol. He's got an amazing property in Cottam, beautiful property in one of those iconic line of houses, and it's old Victorian house, and it's an elderly couple, and they rent two of their rooms on Airbnb, and I went there to do some to help them out to make sure they're all fully compliant. And it's great. So they just toppen up their income. And he says, without it, I wouldn't be able to, keep up my house. And fair play, the cost of life is rising. So some of them people out there, this is just a means of keeping up their income and budget, and being able to actually afford the house they live in, because everything just goes so expensive these days. And this is it. So if you're renting your room up to 90 days, 90 nights, that's specific nights in a year, that you're allowed to do this without planning permission. You can just carry on. You might need to be asked to register yourself in a national register, but you don't need to apply for to do this if you're just keeping yourself under 90 nights. But however, the new existing short-term rentals not used as a primary residence will force stricter regulations, including the classification, so changes, and in some cases maybe revocation. So they might be stripped of those permitted development rights by the local council, and they would need to maybe reapply. But this is a grey area, because we don't know if they will be able to reapply and demonstrate the properties are just adhering to all of the regulations, all of the so health and safety regulations, and they will get the grandfather's rights, but they would need to evidence that they have everything in place, and I think that's a good thing. So how about the tourism? Because tourism help your local economy. So the government approach is aimed to protect the local housing market by giving communities more control. Fine. The registration is particularly important in cities and towns where the rise of short-term rentals has led to shortage of affordable housing. Now, and I get it. Of course, we want to create communities. It's great to have a community where you live, as you don't want constantly parties and tourists, back and forth. So in that example, like in Cornwall, local MP and the residents have raised a concern about the number of homes being turned into holiday let, making it difficult for local families to find affordable housing. And under this new rule, a homeowner can still rent their primary residence up to 90 nights a year, which allows for additional income without disturbing the local housing market. But if someone is operating a business under the short-term let, they will need to follow all the regulations and make sure that they would evidence, as I previously mentioned, all the health and safety and all the fire risk assessments and everything that is in place, and there might be some standards that would need to adhere to. So, what are the concerns? So, what concerns could we have about the implementation? While the introduction of a national register has been widely supported as a way to gather accurate data and inform, planning decisions, there are concerns about the rapid implementation and potential confusion over classification between a service accommodation and other types of lodging like hotels and bed and breakfast, as these are heavily taxed. So there's also, some uncertainty about how the new planning permissions requirements will affect, the current operators. So what are the challenges for implementation? The rapid introduction of these regulations has raised concern among short-term rentals operator. This industry fears the local councils may struggle to implement and enforce the new rules effectively, especially with limited resources. Like now, how long have we, do we need to wait for any planning permissions to be authorized, to be granted? It takes months. Where I live in Bristol, and planning, so your permitted development rights, if you put the application, so grandfather rights, if you put the applications down, you should have 52 days, so 8 weeks, and technically, if the council will not come back to you within the 8 weeks, you are granted those permission. You can just go ahead and do it. Well, if you adhering to all of the specs and all of the standards, then you can just go ahead and do it. But what they could do is, at the end of the 8 weeks, they could ask you for extension of these PD rights. But technically, again, if you can demonstrate that you are adhering to all of the regulations, you can still go ahead and do it. They're just so understaffed, as they say, and putting additional work, to the council hands, it's just going to, in my opinion, it's just going to extend an extra time and delays, and that again is just going to make, I think, an absolutely mess from this planning department. There is uncertainty of how local councils will, differentiate between the short-term let and other forms of accommodations like B&B and service apartments, and even the hotels. So, as I mentioned, the hotels industry is heavily taxed. So, how are they going to how are they going to approach the service accommodation? Are they will they enforce additional tax on it? So even a planning permission, full planning permission for class use will definitely trigger fees for planning. So is this a scheme to just bring an extra money into a council's house? It's a very good question. And I can see some faces here watching today. So you've got your service accommodation businesses. What challenges you think your business will face, and how this will actually affect your business in the coming months while this is being introduced, and how are you protecting yourself and your business maybe to smooth this process as much as possible? If you have those questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to see them. So, what are the opportunities for property investors? And I'm sure there will be, because although these regulations might seem restrictive, they also present opportunities for seasoned property investors who understand the market and can navigate the new rules. This could potentially reduce the competition from less experienced operators to ensure that only the compliant high standard accommodations remain available, and that will benefit both investors and local communities. And I'll give you an example here. I do not have service accommodation myself, but the latest project we completed in Bristol, that's James Road project, it is 6-bedroom ensuite, high-end HMO, and we converted this property having in mind a boutique hotel approach. So we could easily convert the property into a service accommodation, because when we did this, we started last year, and we were aware of all of these introduction, all of the restrictions, and I'm like, okay, so let's have in mind this property and the project, the main focus is on a high-end HMO, but let's make sure that we are going to convert the property into a hotel boutique style approach. So we could convert the property easily, just like that, into service accommodation. But we want to make sure that we will be compliant to all of the HMO regulations, because currently, in my opinion, HMO regulations are the highest level of of standards and health and safety, and even all the room standards and space size of the property. Uh, I cannot imagine being any stricter than than it would be for service accommodation. Even in hotels, there is no room standards, there is no room sizes. So I thought by applying this, this thought of let's make sure we're compliant with all the HMO regulations, get the HMO license, and run the property as we intended for HMO. But if we want to choose to convert it into a service accommodation, as simply as this, or just be able to convert it. And if we don't like, the hassle, of running, the noise of running service accommodation, we will have the license in place, and we can just flip the switch and convert it back to, high-end HMO. There are pros and cons on both, both sides of this coin, and I wonder how you are looking at this, but I think the opportunities for these new regulations, as and when they come, will present a great deal for exiting market landlords who have a really run down properties, and they just been let under the radar to operate, but actually I have used bad service accommodations before, and it was like, how can you operate? How people really put up with this low level of standards? And it's a very good question. And we should be using the forms and reviews, and just give them honest review. If the property is great, just give it 5 star. But if it's equally bad, just feedback, because how many of us are just running around busy, and we just don't have time to leave a bad feedback, let alone a good one. So I encourage everyone to give a good or bad feedback whenever you're using a service accommodation to promote a good business, and also give a constructive feedback to people who you may help them decide to exit the market altogether, because they might not have the funds to invest back into property, and you might help them make that decision. Maybe a time has come for them to part with this with this investment, and focus on other ventures in their life. And the markets shifts favoring experienced landlord, in my opinion. My good friend and my mentor, Simon Zucchi, he's a prominent property investor, and he suggests that experienced investors could benefit from these changes as well. And that's his teaching: acquiring properties from landlords who may no longer wish to deal with the new regulations, regulatory environment. It creates the new opportunities for investors, and you should invest in yourself, invest in properties, and in my opinion, and look out for these opportunities that are going to just show up on the horizon anytime soon. Well, they do now. In my opinion, like areas that maybe in Bath where I live, the Article 4 directions are already in place, and requiring planning permission for any new conversions, and they just going to restrict everything. But this may be a good, because protecting such great places like Bath, I think this is a fine balance between iconic historical places and yes, I'd love to come and visit. I do go and visit Bath, but a lot of people would like to come and visit Bath. But there is a fine balance between how many short-term lets should there be in the area, and how many and what about the community? What about the spirit of the place? So what's your opinion? What do you think about that? Leave your comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And Looking forward to what's going to happen next. It will be very interesting. So please stay tuned to this podcast as I will be bringing some experienced operators in service accommodation arena, someone who is, in my opinion, a local market leaders, and they've recently have been awarded, a great deal of performance for what they're doing, and I could, I and a lot of people, if you're choosing to go into a service accommodation, you can definitely learn from. I'll leave this as a secret for you to join us in the next few weeks coming. I'll make sure I will post it. I'll post about this in a due course. But, ladies and gentlemen, this would be the end of today episode about service accommodation. And if you're worried about the new regulations that are coming, you should not. You should not fear this, because let's promote a good business, a good standard. Let's promote, high quality properties and investments that we do, and we will help people who are exiting the market to convert this property and put them back into use as properly as they should be in the first place. And my personal touch on this is it's a good thing that this is happening, and I encourage a lot of people to explore the area of seeing if that strategy, it's one of many strategies in a property investment, and maybe there's something for you. So stay tuned, give us a comment, give us a like if you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to see you next week. Thank you. Have a great weekend.